Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we're live. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are the Coffey team. I'm part of Coffey's communications team, and I have Ramsey Pickard here with us today, Coffey's project manager and professional engineer. Hi, Ramsey. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, hi there, Marissa.
Good to have you on board, Ramsey. Today, we're talking about a really cool topic, floodplain management. And, we're going to talk about what that is so that everyone, who's listening who might not know about it can understand what we're going to start to talk about throughout this conversation. But one of the things I wanted to mention at this point is that, this is kind of an exciting stream today, because floodplain management, the topic we're going over today, is actually quite a hot topic right now in the industry and the community. And Ramsey, can you help tell us just briefly, why floodplain management is such a hot topic right now, without going too much into depth, because we'll get into explaining what floodplain management is in a minute.
All right, so starting in October, FEMA is going to change the way that they calculate flood insurance rates. So that basically means your insurance could go up, it could go down, depending on what kind of house you live in and what kind of risk there is at your location.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this would be a topic that just the everyday person could be interested in. This is not actually a topic that's just targeted for people in our industry of engineering and surveying. This is something that just the everyday person or homeowner or property owner would be interested in, because if they live in an area where flood insurance is something that might be required, this would definitely be a topic that would interest them today. Is that right?
Well, that's exactly right.
Okay, awesome. So let's dive into what floodplain management is, Ramsey. Can you help us understand what floodplain management entails?
So basically, floodplain management is just a community-based effort to prevent or reduce the risk of flooding. So basically, when you're building in a floodplain, you'll just want to make sure you're not going to be causing adverse impacts to your neighbors in the community.
Okay, so it's this effort. So floodplain management is an effort to manage the area that is designated in a floodplain.
Yeah, because flooding is going to happen no matter what, but you can take steps to prevent how severe that flooding is around the community.
So that's what floodplain management actually is, the action of, taking certain steps to mitigate. It's basically recognizing, hey, we're in an area that would be affected by, heavy rain or flooding. So let's implement certain day-to-day or annual ordinances so that we can prevent the impact of a flood.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, before we get any further, let's just I just want to invite everyone listening or watching today to go ahead, if you're on Facebook, to type in comments or questions that you may have into the chat box of this live stream. And we will be answering those questions either as we go, if it falls into the current conversation that we're in, or at the very end of our live stream today, we're going to allocate time to answer any questions as they come in, if we have not already answered them. So please feel free to engage with us. Just send us a note. Let us know if you think something's interesting. Like the live stream if you're having a good time. And if something didn't make sense, even if you just want us to repeat something or clarify something, just type that question into the chat box. I'll be watching it all throughout this live stream. Okay, so Ramsey, I'm going to turn the mic back over to you. Let's talk about what benefits there would be with floodplain management. why would someone want to have this be in a community that's actively engaging in floodplain management?
Well, I think first off, it's going to lower the cost of your flood insurance premiums. You'll be paying less a month. Secondly, or probably first and foremost, it's safety of human life. When a flood does happen, you want to make sure that it's as least severe as possible to save life and property damage, and make sure that you're going to be safe during a flood event.
Sure. So those are pretty important things there. The first, one being human life and safety, and then the other one being that floodplain management could help reduce your insurance rates. So why would floodplain management help reduce your insurance rates? Does it have to do with the decreased risk when you're actually taking care of certain or abiding by certain ordinances that help mitigate those risks for flooding?
So proper floodplain management, usually before you build, the engineer can determine the base flood elevation, and then usually you'll want to build at least 1.5 feet above the base flood elevation. And that right there is going to either lower your insurance rates a lot or completely remove them. It's very important that when you're building in the floodplain to look into what you can do to mitigate those factors before you start planning for it. It's really one of the first things you want to look into when you're looking to build on a site, is whether or not you're in a floodplain, and then what can you do to make it as easy as possible to build in that floodplain.
And how would you know, how would you start this process? So let's say I bought or I'm interested in buying a piece of property to build a home on. How would I begin this process of okay, is this on a floodplain or is it not? And then, how, I might not even be thinking about flood insurance at that point. So I can imagine that some people unfortunately begin, they'll buy a property. Is it possible that they would buy a property without having noted whether or not it was on the floodplain, and then they go to build and they run into some issues because there's some setbacks and potentially have just a large insurance premium that they have to pay because of where they chose to build?
So FEMA has a very good mapping portal. You just go to the FEMA site and you'll be able to type in your address, and it'll kind of pull right up a Google Map images of the address you type in, and you'll be able to tell if you're in a floodplain pretty easily from that.
So this is a step that a homeowner or potential homeowner should do prior to purchasing. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And then if you do find out you're in a floodplain, there's a lot of stuff Coffey Engineering can do to help you get through the whole process, because once you're in the floodplain, it basically triggers a floodplain analysis that will have to be signed and stamped by a professional engineer. And that's just kind of an extra check that being in a floodplain triggers.
And is that something you would inherit? Could you inherit the floodplain analysis from a previous homeowner, or is it something that if you were to buy that property, you would need a new one performed?
Well, that would just mainly depend on if the owner before had completed an elevation certificate. Basically an elevation certificate is just a document from FEMA that kind of shows where the base flood elevation is on your property, and then the lowest floor elevation of your building. And so if you're just buying a property, If it already has an elevation certificate, you would probably be good to go. But then if you're buying a property and you want to do an addition to that property or build a new building on that property that has a bigger footprint than the old property, you're going to have to go through the floodplain analysis.
Okay. All right. So then I guess, a great thing that we could do now is go into some of these samples. Do you have an example for us today that we could go into of what this would look like in real life and what Coffey has done in certain floodplain projects?
Yeah, let's see if I can't share my screen here.
And in the meantime, it looks like Chase Corbridge. Hi, Chase. He's one of Coffey's team members as well. Thanks for joining us. It looks like he put a message into the chat box that is a link to the flood map that Ramsey was just speaking of. So if you are a new homeowner, potential homeowner, and you want to determine, even if you just want to know, if you don't know this already, am I in a floodplain or am I in a flood hazard zone? You can go to, it's FEMA.gov/flood-maps. Alternatively, you could just look at Chase's message here in the comment box. And go there, and it might be an interesting experiment to type in your address and see where you are there. Thanks, Chase.
All right, so it looks like, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
So here's a good example of what a flood map would look like. This is for the City of Edgewater Safe Route to School project. Basically, they're doing street improvements for kids to get to school safe. The intersection that we are working on is the 26th and Kendall Street. So if we go down, here are the proposed improvements with the corresponding HECRAS cross sections. So they wanted to do a raised median, some raised crosswalks, and some bike medians here. And so what we ended up doing is we modeled it in HECRAS, which is a one-dimensional hydraulic modeling software that was developed by the Army Corps of Engineers. So we can take you to, here's what a typical HECRAS cross-section looks like. So if you kind of look at it, we've got like right here is the curb and gutter with the raised, or with the crown of the road, and then back curb and gutter. So if we kind of take a look at, after, these are the updated HECRAS cross sections that we modified to show the proposed improvements. So if you take a closer look, here's kind of the curb and gutter, and then here's the raised median, and back down to the curb and gutter. And what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish with these HECRAS modeling is to see if those proposed improvements are going to raise the base flood elevation of the floodplain.
Okay, so basically what this is that you had to perform these models to see if developing that that median and that in part of that safe route to school initiative, that if you all developed this median, that it wouldn't offset where the base flood would elevation is. So you're basically trying to prove, or ideally you want to see when you do these analyses, that hey, what we're building here is not going to offset or cause any consequences that would impact these flood zones and make flooding more of a risk. Is that right, Ramsey?
Yeah, so basically we don't want these proposed improvements to cause flooding in other areas around the adjacent property. So like if we got into the model and we showed that it raises the water surface elevation a foot and that foot would cause other houses to be flooded, then we would have to say that these improvements wouldn't be able to be built. So luckily in this case, when we ran it through the model, we found that the water surface elevation did rise slightly, but it wasn't enough to impact any adjacent properties.
Okay. And then can you help us, can you just like zoom into one of these graphs? And I'm sure that a lot of the engineers listening in, they'll understand this, but I find it so interesting, and I'd like to kind of break down the pieces of it. So it looks like your elevation is your y-axis here on the vertical. So it looks like, we're around the elevation of, 5,300 feet, 5,400 feet. And then what's our x-axis here? It says, is that station feet?
Yeah, so that's just the length of the cross-section in the HECRAS model. So this one's about 400 feet long.
Okay.
And let's see, I have a little exhibit. So here's kind of what it looks like in real life. So here's the start of the cross section, and then it comes down, and here's the end of the cross section. And just to
start in the beginning again, and make make your mouse a little more, move it around a little more so we can kind of see where you are. There you are. Okay. Yeah.
So yep. So in this cross section, this would be station 0, and then this is about station 410.
Okay.
And that's kind of how you can tell of what stations or which points in the models you need to modify in order to get the raised median improvements accurately shown in the HECRAS model.
Okay, and so these stations are just kind of like points of the ground.
That's exactly right.
Okay, and so they correspond. So that visual, that was a really cool one that you showed us to actually see it in real life. So the visual where you showed us where station, I think you said 0 and station 10. Is that what those are the two? I think you said station 0 and station 10. Where those are, they correspond to. Those are actually like points on the ground. Like you could walk, 400 feet this way and mark it as station 0, and then walk back 400 feet and mark that as station, 1, let's say. And then on this graph, you would see corresponding that would be the corresponding black dots on the graph. Is that right? Like for station 1 and station 10?
Yes. So basically every one of these black dots represents a real life elevation in the cross section. Okay.
And then the blue lines that run across horizontally, I see that those correspond to, I think it says, let's see, is it 10-year, 50-year, 100-year, 500-year? Can you explain what those are?
Yeah, so basically it's the water surface elevation for a specific storm event. So like up here, this 500-year, that actually corresponds to a rainfall event that has a 0.2% chance of happening any given day or year. And then you come down one line, and this one's the 100-year. That's the 1% chance to happen any given year. And that's the standard that we are designing to. So what you're looking at when you're modeling this is how much does the 100-year water surface elevation change with the proposed improvements. And then you go down and you have the 50 and the 10-year storm events.
Okay, and so the conclusion of this project was that through these graphs, and all the measurements and data points that you all collected, you were able to see that the flooding chance would be altered a little bit, but not significantly enough. So you were able to go ahead and move forward with developing that median as the Safe Route to School initiative.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. And how is this project doing? Is the median being built, or is it already been built, or where is it in the process?
So right now we're in the review process with the city of Edgewater. I've submitted the first draft of the floodplain analysis, and hopefully it comes back that they say it's good to go and there's no comments, but they might come back with some minor comments that we'll have to address. But I think we are well on our way to getting this approved, and hopefully they'll be building it soon.
Oh wow! So this is a project happening right now.
Yes, this is one of our current projects.
Okay, that's really cool. Well, that was a great one to choose today, and it's definitely a very relevant and just sort of tangible project, because we think, that we hear about this, Safe Route to School initiative, but we don't realize all of the things that go with that initiative and all of the steps that it takes, and the engineering marvels that have to happen, as we can see on these graphs. Just a lot of data that makes certain projects happen.
Yes, and this project was more of a municipality project. We're doing it for the city of Edgewater. I have an example of one that would just be for an individual homeowner, if you'd like to go into that.
That would be great. Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea, because, it's interesting. Do you want me to close down your screen while you're switching over?
I think I can just tap on this.
Cool.
So,
well, this looks really interesting. I mean, it's I'll let you get into it, but it's really interesting to see such a large project that affects so many people, all of those, students in Edgewater. And then now we're moving to just one individual homeowner, and how they might need engineering services, or, to understand floodplain management. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Yep. So this was a project that the homeowner came to us a couple years ago. They wanted to change their existing carport into a enclosed garage, just to improve the looks of their home. So here's the before picture with the carport, and then here's the final project after we got through the floodplain analysis and the city of Fort Collins approved it. They were able to build a enclosed garage, which I think has a lot of benefits to the carport. And this project was relatively straightforward. We were able to argue that since the building footprint of the structure was not changing, that they wouldn't it wouldn't have any adverse effects on the floodplain. And just to get into some of the more technical stuff of what has to go into building or enclosing this garage. So since it is in the floodplain, floodproofing is required. So in the typical rule of thumb for that is that you need 1 square inch of vents per every 1 square foot of enclosed area.
Okay.
So, and then the floodproofing vents need to go on 2 different walls, and that kind of helps it. So if a flood does happen, it'll flow. The water will have a place to flow through. So I hope the clients were pretty happy. I think their new house looks pretty nice, or the new garage looks nice. And it's a nice improvement.
And so let's back up a minute. So this is just a house in Fort Collins, right? Fort Collins, Colorado?
Yep.
So this is just a regular house in a regular neighborhood in Fort Collins, Colorado. I've been there. I like Fort Collins. So why did they need to do this? So they just wanted to build a garage, and they needed to go through this whole floodplain process. It sounds like because you stated that they are in the floodplain, and so would they have potentially done what we were talking about in the beginning of this live stream, where perhaps they are looking into modifying their home, and perhaps they were smart enough to think, oh well, let's look at let's go to that FEMA.gov/flood-maps and see if we're in the floodplain. And then, if they found out they were, they might have called you and said, hey, this is what this map is showing me. Does this mean I need to go through you guys or anything? Or perchance, would it have been a different process too, where maybe they would have just contacted a builder to go ahead and begin the work, and then maybe that builder pushed back on them and would have said, hey, I know this area and I know where I can build things and where I can't without going through an engineer, and this happens to be a floodplain, so we do need to go through an engineer. I'm just curious, Ramsey, like, where does somebody get notified, hey, you're in the floodplain, you can't just build something right now?
So if I remember correctly, in this person's case, they went ahead and built their garage, not knowing it was in the floodplain.
Oh, goodness.
And then the city of Fort Collins came after the fact and told them that they had to get it certified to be in compliance with their regulations. So it's not always that the homeowner knows up front that they're building in a floodplain. Sometimes the city or the county will come back and say, hey, we noticed you did this work and it was unpermitted in the floodplain, and then they have to go back and get that get the analysis done after the fact.
Okay, and was that did that make it any harder on you all to do that, or were you guys was Coffey just able to step in and make it happen?
It really wasn't too difficult of a process. Luckily, this wasn't like a major addition. Just enclosing the garage or enclosing the carport didn't really have a lot of effects, so it was pretty easy to prove that it wasn't going to cause an adverse effect.
Got it. And in an easier case like this, I'm really curious about all of these things. So in an easier case like this one, I know that every home is different. So even if we just, found another home down the street that wanted to, build a garage, it might be a totally different situation. It might not be as easy. There might be other factors at play, but you're stating that for this particular home, it was fairly easy, fairly simple of a job. Still, in that instance, about how long does this project take you? Is it something that takes like a week, or is it something that takes 60 days?
So with a project like this, the typical turnaround for us is once we get the signed contract, it's about a week before we can submit to the city. And then really it depends on how busy the city is or how backed up they are. They can spend 2 weeks to a month reviewing the floodplain analysis, and then if they have any comments, we typically would address those right away and get it back into the city as soon as possible. And I would say start to finish, maybe 2 months or so to get it.
And it sounds like though that 2 months is largely impacted by that review period. It sounds like that's the longest period, that review period through the city or through the local jurisdiction. and from what I understand, the actual work that you needed to do just to research and do the analysis just on Coffey's side, just that initial piece that Coffey takes care of, and the part that's really in Coffey's hands. It sounded like, what did you say, that took about a week in this instance? And I know that you still have to wait another month, and then it kind of comes back to you, so it might come back into your hands again. But assuming that, you know, it was approved after that review period by the local jurisdiction, the amount of work in the beginning that Coffey has to do is about, does it take about a week to perform this analysis?
Not exactly. The analysis can be done in 1 to 2 days. It's just sometimes the workload, and it gets in the queue of projects to do. So
Sure.
Typically we tell people, hey, you know, give us a week and we'll have this submitted. But the analysis really only takes a day or two. And obviously we try to get to things as quickly as possible, but sometimes there's just other projects that you have that have to come in the order that you get them. So
Sure. And, you know, it's nice to know, you know, definitely, as you answered the question from the client perspective of, oh, about how long will this take me if they're in a pinch, and they want this, you know, they want this garage so badly and they want to get it through. It's always good to know how long it takes the engineering firm like Coffey to do that. But where my interest was in the question was just, you know, how much work goes into this floodplain. So it sounds like it can take about, you know, 2 days. It's like 2 days worth of work to do the analysis and figure it all out. So that's definitely quantifies it as quite a project, you know, to focus on something like this for a day or two. And I'm sure in other cases it's a lot longer than that.
yeah. So, and I guess I have one more project we could take a look at. This is more of on the developer side.
Okay.
So this, let's see. So I guess it's just starting off. This little pin is the site. It's in the Harvard Gulch floodplain down in Denver. So in order to do this, the first step was to calculate the base flood elevation, and we did that by using this flood profile. We found where the building footprint was approximately in this profile, and then we came in and found this is the 100-year surface elevation line, and we determined the base flood elevation. So then the city and county of Denver's regulations state that the lowest floor elevation has to be 1.5 feet above the base flood elevation. They call that the flood protection elevation. So then here's kind of a Google Street image, and our project was lucky enough to be located next to a recently built duplex. So you can tell, like right here is the flood protection elevation. And this is the house that we're doing a grading plan for. So you can tell during a 100-year event, the lowest floor elevation is actually below the base flood elevation. So in a big rain event, this house has a great potential to have flood damage. So what happened is we got hired by a developer who wants to turn this house into a duplex. I'm actually working on this today. I'm putting, yeah. So after we get off this floodplain talk, I'm working on a floodplain project. So we're putting together a grading plan that will meet the city and county of Denver standards to flood-proof the proposed development.
So that white home on the left side of the image is going to potentially be, what is it, do you know yet? Is it going to maybe be knocked down and then a duplex would be built on top of it, or are they converting that structure into the duplex?
That house is going to be demoed, and then a duplex, a new building will be built on the site.
Okay, so you don't have to work with something that's already there, sort of, at least the structure. So basically, you guys are assessing the land and the elevation to figure out where those flood chances and risks would be, and then you're essentially going to determine certain structural criteria that needs to happen in the new duplex to ensure that the risk of flooding will be as low as possible.
That's correct. And really what we're doing is we're going to be flood proofing it. So even during a 100-year event, the structure should sustain zero damage or zero flood damage.
Wow. And how do you flood proof? What goes into that?
So if you take a look at this bottom structure here.
Can you zoom in a little bit for us on that image?
Yeah, so in this duplex, from this line to the ground surface, that's all empty crawl spaces.
Okay.
So then they'll put flood vents in there. So then if a major flood does happen, water will flow through a flood vent here and flow underneath the house and out a flood vent on the other side. And that's basically the same design we're going to be using for the new development right next door.
Oh, how interesting. So I walk by houses or duplexes like this all the time that seem to be raised a few feet off the ground. Is this generally what that design is for? I mean, is it safe to say that, you know, that's most likely due to a flood requirement?
It's very likely, yes.
Very likely. Oh, cool. So I can walk around with, you know, if I'm walking with a friend or something, I can sound, you know, sound informed and let them know that there must be a flood requirement around there, most likely. Well, that's really cool. Well, good luck on that project today. It's really great to have something that you're working on, not only, you know, just like the previous project, but something that you're working on today. So that's really exciting. I think, you know, is there anything else project-wise that you wanted to talk about? I have a couple questions for you, just random, you know, different questions about floodplain management.
Those were the only 3 projects I kind of had prepped to share today. So why don't we jump to your questions?
Okay, great. So we have this infographic that we've been talking about, Ramsey. So I'm going to pull this up. And it's a nice little infographic that Coffey has made. And I'm just going to try to zoom in a little bit. Well, basically, we'll zoom out and just to take a overall browse of it. And then we'll start to zoom into the various pieces so that you can actually read the text. But essentially, this infographic is how to change your designated flood zone. So this is really interesting because we've been talking about these situations, your last 3 projects in which you know, whether it's the Safe Route to School initiative or it's a homeowner wanting to convert their carport into garage, or it's a developer wanting to buy up a house and turn it into a duplex. All of these previous instances were situations in which the, you know, the party at hand, whether it's the developer or the municipality or the homeowner, they were subject to the land. They were subject to the floodplain or the flood zone that they were in. It, you know, basically you choose the location. There's an existing flood zone. You're in an existing floodplain. And so you have to go through a floodplain analysis, or you have to, just assess and kind of go through this process and, and get flood insurance and all of those things based, again, on the circumstances you're in. Now, this infographic to me is really interesting, because how could you change that? And can you kind of, and this is something that happens. And I think it's worth noting and worth talking about. It's not that just anyone could change their flood zone because they don't want to, pay the insurance premium. But it's that, in certain cases, the flood zone actually might not be accurate, or might need to be changed based on, certain time that has passed, and conditions such as, like, has there been new development in the area? Is there climate change affecting that floodplain? Is there new scientific progress that's happened? Are there certain infrastructure or populations that have happened since the last time that flood zone has been mapped, that it's worth actually taking another look at the land that you're on today and seeing if it's still accurate? Is that right, Ramsey? Like, can we get into this a little bit and talk about this a little bit? I'm going to zoom in to some of the first steps here, just so that, if you want to talk about them, we can have that up on the screen.
Yeah, that's correct. So this graphic pretty much goes through the LOMA process. That's a letter of map amendment. So what that means is basically the homeowner thinks that the floodplain maps are wrong and they're not actually in the floodplain. So they want to request a LOMA. And typically the first steps in that would be getting an elevation certificate, just providing what elevation your house is at, or your property is at. And then comparing that to the base flood elevation. And if your property is above the base flood elevation, you can be removed from the floodplain. And that's very important, because you could go from paying flood insurance to not having to pay flood insurance at all. So the first step is to go on the fact-finding mission of what's the base flood elevation and what's the elevation of your property. And then you would submit your elevation certificate to FEMA, and they would review it. And if they agree with your findings, you can be removed from the floodplain.
Wow. And so, and this happens from time to time. I mean, if there's such a process for this, this is something that does occur. It seems like, from the research that we've done, that, there are these factors that I talked about earlier that seem very real, just population growth, infrastructure change. Some things might have just impacted that floodplain, or it could have just been, and even on FEMA's website, they say it's possible that there were, some inaccuracies in the map to begin with. So it's worth taking a second look at some of these flood maps if you are, subject to a large insurance premium, or, just anything that seems that, perchance might not be accurate and should be looked at, something that really impacts your situation. It might be, really worth taking another look at your flood map and going through a professional engineer and just seeing what your situation really is.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh, thanks. I think I rambled a little bit there, but I appreciate that. Okay, well, yeah. So we have this infographic, and this is actually going to be posted on our social media soon. So in the next few days. So be sure to to stay tuned to our social media, and you'll have this graphic. It'll appear on our Facebook, our LinkedIn, and our Instagram. Also, if you are, for those listening, if you are a subscriber to our e-newsletter. We do send that out, the newsletter, just once a month. So we're not one of those people that bug you a bunch. But we send it out once a month, and this infographic did go out in that newsletter. So along with some other interesting information about floodplain management, which is our topic for the month. So if you want to join our newsletter, you can just go to coffeyeng.com to go ahead and subscribe and receive these documents or some of this information a little bit before it gets released. And I'm actually just gonna type in here really quickly so that it's up on the screen. Here we go. That's our URL for our website. So coffeyeng.com. That's where you can go to access our e-newsletter. You can also access a couple articles that we've written about floodplain management this month, and other articles that we've written. You can also actually find next week, the blog post will be posted for Ramsey's, one of Ramsey's projects that he went over today, the home that converted their carport into a garage. So that will be on the website too. So be sure to take a look at coffeyeng.com and definitely sign up for our newsletter if you want to be, stay apprised of our information before it's slowly released. All right, I'm going to pull that off the screen there, and I'm going to get rid of this infographic. And so, Ramsey, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit more about a question or two that I still have about floodplain management, if you can kind of help us. I know we're coming to a close here, so just a couple more questions that can help people understand floodplain management. And one is FEMA. So where does FEMA fall into floodplain management? It sounds like they're kind of, they have sort of this governing authority over floodplain management, but then also, it sounds like many people, when they're, like the developer or the homeowner in those instances that you talked about, it sounds like they're going through the local jurisdiction. So how does that work? Do you start with the local jurisdiction and then potentially it gets funneled up the chain and FEMA approves the situation, or how does that all work?
So you're mostly working with your local jurisdiction, so your local town, city, or county, to get your project approved. And then really FEMA comes in as the final check and approves it.
Okay, so both both are correct. You're going through the local jurisdiction first, and then that local jurisdiction kind of helps you get in through FEMA. Is that correct?
Yes, and on projects like the carport to a garage, FEMA typically wouldn't get involved in something so small. But if you're going to do like letter of map revision or a letter of map amendment, then FEMA would do the final check. And then I think really if you're changing HECRAS models, I think FEMA would come in with a final check on that as well.
So in the instance of the HECRAS model, you changed the HECRAS model, if that's the safe way to say what your process was there, for the safe route to school graphs that you showed us, right? Would that be something that FEMA would get involved in at the end?
Possibly, I think so. I know they would have to approve the changes I made and then ratify that as the new HECRAS model for that floodplain.
Okay. So it sounds like they're, involved a little more firsthand in certain situations and a little more pulled back in other situations. And so let's see, what other questions did I have? Talking about, the benefits of floodplain management, what do you think is the most critical aspect of floodplain management?
That would have to be just human safety, I think. Just making sure that everyone is safe during a flood event. And then it's really just, property management too, mitigating property damage and making sure that when a big flood event does happen, a bunch of people aren't left homeless, or at least as few as possible aren't left homeless and without resources, and really just trying to make a flood event as painless as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is really, you really hit the nail on the head when you said, the safety of human life. This is a public safety issue, floodplain management. It absolutely is. So, I think many people can remember, some of these flood events that we've had in our country in the last, within the last 10 years. I think, Boulder County in Colorado was hit pretty hard in 2013, I think it was. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. And then also the Poudre River in Fort Collins, there was some damage there as well, including the Big Thompson. So it was all along the Front Range. A lot of culverts and bridges got wiped out by the floods and had to be rebuilt.
Oh, wow. And, these are, some of these situations are really just, an inch of rain one day, an inch of rain the next day, an inch of rain the next day. You don't think it's that much rain, but if it accumulates and if it keeps coming, that can happen. And that's when, some of these bigger events can happen that are, not really expected. And so that's really where those, those flood events that you were talking about come into play. That 50-year flood event, 100-year flood event, 500-year flood event. Those are kind of those benchmarks that FEMA and engineers, floodplain management engineers, have implemented to basically categorize different areas and their chance of flood each year. Is that correct?
Yeah, and what's important to understand is when a flood happens, it's not going to be just a 100-year event. It'll be like more than a 100-year event or a slightly under a 100-year event. So the 100 years is just the baseline that we designed to, in hopes that we can really catch or keep people safe during a flood event.
And can you break down that 100-year flood event for us a little bit more? I think when you were going over it in the Heckgrass model, you had mentioned a percent. So the 100-year, whichever year you want to choose, whether it's the 50 or the 100-year, it actually boils down to there's a point something % chance of that event happening each year. Is that right?
Yeah, so a 100-year event has a 1% chance of happening in any given year, or really technically any given day.
Okay.
So.
Okay, and then with that event, is it marked by a certain elevation of flood, or what are the other pieces of that benchmark? Is it just, hey, there's a chance of a flood, 1% chance of a flood this year, or is it actually there's a 1% chance of a flood this year that is this high?
Well, I think what you're asking is that it's a 1% chance of it happen on any given day. So then the 100-year storm event is calculated out to have a cubic feet per second of flow if you're talking about a river, or if it's not a river flood, it's just a heavy rainfall event. They'll calculate it in inches per hour.
Got it. Yeah, that was exactly what I was asking. Thanks for clarifying and getting me. Wonderful. Anything else on that? I have one more question for you.
All right, let's get to that last question then.
Okay. What is Coffey Engineering's most common request related to floodplain management that you think kind of you see the most of every day?
I think it's really comes down to people wanting to build additions on their houses, or I think one of the more recent ones that we had come in is a business wanted to build a loading dock on their building, and it happened to be in a floodplain. So usually it's on a every day to day, it's like elevation certificates, just to prove no adverse effects on floodplains, and to set a base flood elevation at their site and a lowest floor elevation for their building. And then we get a lot of just people wanting to build in the floodplain, and then kind of asking us what the process of what do we need to do in order to flood proof our building, and what elevations we'll need to raise our site to be out of the floodplain. And then if raising the site is going to cause an adverse impact on adjacent properties in the floodplain.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess we can just start to close everything. I'm going to kind of just highlight some of the key takeaways I've had from you today, Ramsey. Basically, and then you jump in and tell me if I've missed anything. But basically, floodplain management is something that is a public safety issue. It's not, only reserved for, an engineer or, FEMA. It's actually a public safety issue, so it concerns communities, it concerns the everyday person. It also, another note or key takeaway that I've had from you today is that aside from it being a public safety issue, it applies to the everyday person in the sense that, most of us have homes or rent homes or have a property. And so, flood insurance may be something that we have to pay attention to, because we might be in a floodplain and we might be paying for flood insurance. So anyone who wants to modify their home that is living in a floodplain, or anyone that wants to build on a piece of land, they would need to basically first determine, am I in a floodplain? And then, call an engineer and see what they need to happen in order to make this process of building come to fruition. I'm actually, while I'm on that key takeaway, I'm going to pull up Chase's comment. Again, Chase is one of our Coffey team members. Thank you, Chase, for tuning in and typing in the FEMA URL for anyone who just wants to, even if you're just curious, this is where you would go based on what Ramsey said. This is where you would go to determine if you're in, if you're in a floodplain, or what flood zone, what type of flood zone you're currently in. Is that right, Ramsey?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, good. And then, I think really the third thing comes back to this URL, and it is, if you are curious, if you are looking to, to just get some further information about the land that you're currently on, or a land that you're potentially interested in, or if you're a builder or a developer, go ahead and start with this URL here, this FEMA resource. And then you can always, if you find out some information, or if you're confused by what you see, you can always call us at Coffey Engineering. And we'll do our best to help you. Based on Ramsey's projects, it really seems like he's had a fair share of different breadth of projects, whether it's a developer, whether it's a municipality, or whether it's just an everyday person looking to build something on their property. So those are kind of the key takeaways that I've had from our call today, Ramsey. Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate it. It's certainly a topic that is important right now. We can even make that a final key takeaway, which is just how important it is right now, to reiterate what Ramsey was saying earlier about FEMA is currently changing how they are rating the different locations and insurance rates. I probably botched that, Ramsey. Can you clear that up for me? What is FEMA doing right now?
Oh, so basically, FEMA is implementing a new risk rating system that is going to determine how much flood insurance you pay based on a couple new factors.
Okay.
Those factors kind of include like how far away you are from the nearest body of water, and how much it would cost to repair the damages of your home, amongst other things. It can get pretty complicated, so the average everyday person might not be able to figure out on their own if they are paying too much for flood insurance.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like FEMA is changing how they're. It sounds like they're adding in new criteria to how they're rating these policies.
Yep, that's exactly it.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, Ramsey, anything else for us today, or should we close it here?
I think we're safe to close out. Thanks for having me, Marissa.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. And just a reminder to everyone, if you followed along the entirety of this live stream, we always try to do a little something for you guys for joining us. So each month we do a giveaway. So if you just stay tuned to our Facebook over the next few days, we're going to ask a question that was answered in this live stream. And the first person to answer it on Facebook or Instagram does get a prize from us at Coffey Engineering, and we just go ahead and mail it out to you. So we, for whoever answers it first, we just kind of send them a private direct message, and we say, hey, can we have your address? We'll send you this package, and then you guys get sometimes some coffee swag, sometimes some other little promotions. So do stay tuned to our social media if you did listen along the entirety of this, and do have an answer to that question that will appear on our Facebook post soon. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Ramsey, so much. I hope this was all informative for everyone. And if anyone has any questions about floodplain management, feel free to contact us at coffeyeng.com. You can get all of our contact information there. All right, everyone, we're going to close it out for now. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.